Hey, do you teach yoga? Have you ever trained to lead yoga classes, to be a yoga therapist? Have you ever owned a yoga studio? Maybe even just wondered what it was like for the women and men up there in front of the room on their mats, leading you through endless Surya Namaskars, down dogs, and pranayamas galore? Well, these are their stories, and mine. I'm Rebecca Sebastian, a 20-year yoga teacher, 10-year yoga therapist, yoga studio owner, and co-founder of a yoga-focused nonprofit. I've done a lot in the yoga world over the last 20 years, pretty much everything except had a water cooler. You know, a place to share stories, talk about struggles, successes, and find other people who do the same thing that I do. Welcome to Working in Yoga, a podcast and substitute water cooler for yoga folks to connect and build community, to share our unique profession, our challenges, and our journeys with the world.
Hey friends, welcome to Working in Yoga. It is another Monday episode of What They Never Told You, and this one is dedicated to all those yoga organizations out there, except the ones I like, which mostly do not exist in the hemisphere that I live in. So the one organization out there that is in the southern hemisphere that I love, have the best day. For the rest of us, here we go. There is a distinction I want to make today that I have never heard made clearly in public. I want to make it carefully because I think that nuance matters. The organizations that govern this profession, the ones that credential you, set the standards, write the ethics codes, show up at the healthcare conferences, and present themselves as the institutional voice of yoga, they believe in yoga deeply, genuinely. They care about the practice. They care about its integrity, its legitimacy, and its future. And they are committed to yoga in a way that I don't want to dismiss or minimize. What they do not believe in, what they have not demonstrated in any meaningful institutional commitment to, is you, the yoga professional, the human being trying to build a sustainable livelihood teaching this practice. Those two things are not the same thing, and the difference between them explains almost everything that is frustrating about how these organizations function. So let me explain why this distinction matters and why it isn't being made. Organizations tend to organize around their founding mission, obviously, right? And the founding mission of most major yoga organizations was to protect and legitimize the practice itself, to establish standards, to differentiate serious yoga from superficial yoga, to make the case to healthcare and academia that the broader public, that yoga is a legitimate discipline worthy of respect. That is real and important as a mission, and they have done meaningful work towards that goal. But somewhere in the design of these organizations, the welfare of the professionals who actually deliver the practice got treated as secondary or assumed or left to individual responsibility in a way that the legitimacy of the practice itself was not left to individual responsibility. The practice needed protecting. Individual yoga professionals were assumed to be able to figure out their own viability. And that assumption has never been examined or questioned or corrected in any systematic way. So why hasn't anyone said this? Partially because it sounds ungrateful. Partially because people inside these organizations do care genuinely about yoga professionals. They just care about the practice more. And that priority has never been made explicit. And also partly because naming it requires acknowledging a design flaw in institutions that a lot of people have invested a lot into. But the professionals who are paying membership dues and certification fees and conference registrations to these organizations deserve to know what they're actually funding and what they're not funding and what they should not be expecting in return. So here is what believing in yoga, but not in yoga professionals, looks like in practice. It looks like detailed, rigorously defended standards for what yoga therapy is allowed to be called, and no advocacy whatsoever for what yoga therapists should be paid. The practice gets protected. The practitioner gets whatever the market offers. It looks like extensive infrastructure for credentialing and continuing education, and no conversation about whether the credential leads to financial viability. The standards for the practice get maintained. The economic reality of the people meeting those standards gets ignored. It looks like showing up at healthcare conferences to make the case for yoga as a therapeutic modality, and never showing up at a labor conversation to make the case for yoga professionals as workers who deserve fair compensation. The practice is advocated for. The practitioners get left out of that advocacy. And it looks like ethics codes that address how yoga professionals should behave towards their students and clients, and essentially no accountability for how institutions should behave towards yoga professionals. The practice has protections. The professionals often do not. You are, in the eyes of these organizations, simply a delivery mechanism for something they care about. And that's not nothing, but it's not the same thing as being cared about as a person building a life. And the difference is felt every time you look at these organizations for support that isn't coming. You're not imagining it. The support was never designed into the system. So what do you do with this? First, adjust your expectations. Stop looking to these organizations for the kind of support they were never built to provide. Stop waiting for the trade organization to solve your income problem, or the certifying body to build the job market, or the membership organization to advocate for your healthcare costs. They're not going to do those things. Not because the people in them don't care about you individually, but because the institution was not designed around that mission. Second, be clear-eyed about what you're paying for when you pay dues and fees and conference registrations. You are paying to maintain your credential. You are paying to support the legitimization of the practice. Those things may be worth paying for. That is a judgment you can make clearly once you know what you're actually buying. What you are probably not getting in return is an organization that is fighting for your professional welfare. Third, and this one matters most, start asking the questions that nobody is asking loudly enough. If the existing organizations were not designed around the welfare of yoga professionals, what would an organization that was designed around that look like? What would it advocate for? What would it require of studios and employers? What would that organization build that doesn't currently exist? Right now, that organization doesn't exist yet. It may need to be built. And the people who need to build it are the ones who have lived the reality that the current organizations were never designed to address. You know that this profession needs, you know what it needs because you're in it. And that knowledge is the beginning of something. So, yes, those organizations, they love yoga, sure. But you deserve an organization that also loves you. That organization may not exist yet, but the people who could build it are listening to this podcast. I'm sure of it. Thank you so much for listening. On Thursday, I'm continuing this conversation with Dr. Stevie Ingram for part 2 of her series, and she and I discuss what yoga organizing and advocacy would and should mean for us as yoga professionals. And next Monday, I'll have another What They Never Told You episode. This one is talking about trauma. If you're interested in my newsletter, head to the show notes and sign up. This is a great way to keep up with all my research and new projects. Let's go get to work, and I will catch you around the water cooler next time.